Welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. 1 year after the deadly roof collapse at a public event in Novi Sad that claimed 16 lives, the tragedy continues to reverberate through Serbian society. It sparked mass student-led protests demanding accountability and an end to corruption. Tensions that once spilled into the streets have given way to a solemn nationwide commemoration, but the political implications are still far from settled. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack the shifting dynamics in Serbia is Konstanty Gebert, a journalist and author, a veteran war correspondent and regional expert. Gebert brings us decades of insight into Balkan politics and protest movements. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
So first, can we take a look at President Vucic's unexpected apology? What does that signal about his current political strategy?
It means he's looking for new ways to delay what he probably will not be able to delay, that is, early parliamentary elections, which are the main demand of the protesters. His apology was typically very mealy-mouthed. He said that people have been attacking other people and attacking the state, and they should apologize, but I too apologize. Frankly, the Vucic administration has been slandering the protest movement ever since it started, and engaging in extremely bizarre actions regarding it. Train communications in Serbia were stopped yesterday because supposedly there was a bomb threat. It's unclear how there could be a bomb threat to the entire network. What was clear was that stopping train communications made it impossible for many people to join the great protest rally in Novi Sad. 2 days ago, a city councillor from Novi Sad, Misha Bačulov, opposition councilman, was arrested for the third time in a year. He's very active in the protest movement, this time under an extremely bizarre accusation that he intended to poison himself and then blame the Vucic administration for an attack on his life. All those grotesque allegations cannot counter the fact that 1 year later, the one thing that Serbian public opinion understands is that the administration is lying about the Novi Sad disaster. A year ago, when the awning at the railroad station collapsed, this was not only a building disaster, it was also a political disaster for President Vucic, as construction work had been underway at the Novi Sad station as part of building a rapid rail connection between Belgrade and Budapest. And the construction was made by a Chinese company selected by the government in a rather murky process. The government assured Serb public opinion that the awning had nothing to do with construction work, which was allegedly done only inside the railroad station. Turned out that this was a lie, and hence one of the main slogans of the protest movement is corruption kills. And corruption is really the rock-solid foundation of the Vucic regime. More importantly, a recent public opinion poll showed that 44% of Serb voters, if elections were to be held now, would support a political party that would have emerged from the protest movement, as opposed to only 32% who would support the ruling Progressive Party. So Vucic very correctly sees in the protest movement a potential threat to his regime. It must be said, however, that no single political party has emerged from the protest movement, that the opposition, such as it is badly splintered and doesn't have much credibility. And in fact, the popularity of the protest movement is due mainly to the fact that it is not a political party. The entire political establishment, both ruling party and opposition, are seen by public opinion with much mistrust. But the bottom line is this protest movement takes place exactly a year, of course, after the railroad station disaster, but also 25 years after the previous huge protest movement that led to the downfall of then President Slobodan Milosevic. When Vučić looks into the mirror, he might see Milosevic's face in it, and that's not a pretty sight.
Right. Well, you brought something very interesting that I want to explore a little bit. It seems to be like a little bit of catch-22 situation where the popularity of these protest movements come from the fact that it is not politically aligned, but actually a very grassroots type of movement. However, you also mentioned that this is going to be a problem going forward because of the non-political nature of it, meaning that there's a very difficult time in actually capitalizing it to use as a force to bring down Vučić's government. How do you think they should proceed going forward? And do you think that this is going to be a big enough of an issue to actually be a hindrance in actually challenging Vučić's rule?
Well, this is the $64,000 question, isn't it? Because we're facing a dilemma. If the movement remains the way it is, an anti-establishment movement, it will conserve its popularity, but that popularity will not translate into direct political impact. If it transforms into a political movement, it will unavoidably lose some or perhaps much of its popularity, and it is unclear to whom that popularity would then go, obviously not to the ruling party, but nationalist opposition parties tried to hijack the movement in the recent weeks, and they have been spectacularly unsuccessful. When the protest movement was taken over to express nationalist sentiments, especially regarding the still unresolved Kosovo issue, participation in rallies dramatically dropped. So unless some kind of credible, and I hesitate to use the word, but yes, charismatic leadership emerges from the movement, it still might remain only an expression of protest, unable to transform itself into political action.
Right. And Vučić's government is also trying to characterize this much like a color revolution or trying to pin it as some sort of political movement aimed at pushing back against his government. Do you think that he is also trying to use this angle to fragment and fracture the current movement that is against him?
Well, yes, but this accusation is in two separate ways ineffective. First of all, the protest movement arose from a disaster due to corrupt business practices and to corrupt attribution of public works to unsafe companies. This is a non-political issue. This is about everybody's safety being threatened by the way that the government is doing its business. So the allegation that this is a color revolution that is to topple the president is simply not borne out by the facts. But second, yes, it's very clear that most Serbs would like to see Vučić go, and this is not a new development. And the reason he stays in power is that there seems to be no credible alternative. So, in fact, the strongest argument for Vučić is, well, I'm here and nobody seems to be able to replace me. To which the protesters say, yes, you're here and you're killing us. It's really very reminiscent of the huge protest movement that toppled Slobodan Milosevic, because there too, the anti-Milosevic opposition was splintered, did not necessarily have a majority behind it. But what happened was that Serb public opinion realized that Milosevic, with his long track record of brutal and lost wars endangers everybody. Today, there is a consensus that Vučić endangers everybody. There simply is not a consensus about how to replace him. And Vučić is very skilled in throwing others under the bus. In February, the entire government resigned. And this obviously did not satisfy the protesters, as the next government is as much an political expression of Vučić as previous. The one thing that could change those equations would be if the European Union would take a more decisive stance against the president. But the European Union is extremely reluctant to do so because Vučić plays a very nimble balancing act between the EU, Russia, and China. And the fear in Brussels is that if the EU acts against Vučić, that might simply be pushing in the arms of the EU's geopolitical rivals. Point is, if a government is so thoroughly corrupt that it actually kills people through corruption, if it uses violence against a legitimate protest movement, mercifully there was no violence yesterday, but many of the demonstrations have been attacked and beaten up by government-sponsored and government-supported thugs, then what is left of Vučić's declared willingness to comply with European ideals and European values? So if anybody can change the equation now, it's Brussels. But it doesn't seem that Brussels is willing to.
Right, so it does seem like there's a lot of factors going into it, be it external, internal, and also a lot of inner working as well. So thank you so much for helping us unpack this very complicated issue, and really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.